Sherry.
Oh, sure.
Okay. Go ahead and call the meeting to order. Monday, November 8th. And first thing on our agenda tonight is roll call.
Lonnie Rainbow,
Here.
Janice Baker, here. Don Trotter,
Here.
Mike Baker,
Here.
Pat Stone, here. And Mark and Sarah are still absent.
Perfect. Oops, there's Sarah.
Sarah's coming in.
Let's go ahead and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mike, you want to go ahead and lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Item number 4, consent agenda. And tonight we have approval of the October 11th, 2021 regular meeting minutes.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, we have a motion by Mike. Do I have a second?
No.
Oh.
You're up.
You're up. Okay.
Sounded good.
Yeah.
I was going for it.
Was that a second from Kat?
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? Okay, carries unanimously. Sherry, you want to give us our financial review?
Sure. The revenue, the income looks a little off this month, yeah, for October. But we just received in another 410,000. It just got posted early.
Where from?
Skip for Q2. And as we begin doing more of the Q1 reimbursements, we'll be calling them. So, we were here to date. We're at, with the 410,000, we're at about 27% of the budget, which we should be at about 33. So we're just slightly under about 6%. But
That's good.
How are we doing on the expenses side?
the expenses are really good. Payroll looks good. We're still a little under budget, just with open positions that haven't been filled yet. And if we add, I think we've got enough bus drivers. I don't know. I know you're going to be adding those routes, but I don't know if we're going to be adding more people or not. But the expenses look really good. We are receiving some miscellaneous income now from Schwab again. We're billing them on a quarterly basis for their advertising on the buses.
Oh, good.
The medical transportation still continues to be a really good source of additional revenue for us. Year to date, we've cleared about 28K. So that continues on for the year.
Cash balance looks like it's pretty solid.
Yeah, everything looks really good. All in all, you know, the expenses were under budget. We're under budget quite a bit, but we do have some new buses that are going to be coming in, what, Q3 and Q4 probably.
Okay.
So that's going to help the expenses. That'll bring us back up. It won't put, it shouldn't push us over though. From what I see, it should pretty much tie us right out. But yeah, I mean, the financials, when I put the budget into the financial system, I took the overall budget and just divided it, you know.
Spread it out across
monthly.
12
months.
Yeah,
Okay.
spread it out monthly. So some months are gonna look, you know, under and some are gonna look over, but it's just because we averaged them. And as we kind of understand our spend throughout the years, we'll be able to, you know, budget like a big amount in a certain month and it'll look better. But for now, I just split it out over the month.
Then I saw that we have the audits. I don't think there's anything on the agenda for that tonight.
I think we talked a little bit about the audit last time.
Yes.
That was the one that you guys approved. That's just the final printed copy.
Okay.
And there were some with the significant audit matters, is there anything in there that we need to know about?
Okay.
I think a lot of it was, they just couldn't tell or something, and maybe we didn't have a record or policy or.
So there was,
Is that
I
what I
think,
remember?
the policy and procedure
7.1.
manual that we gave everybody a copy of.
Mhm.
That should take care of anything with the
Okay.
with the procedural issues.
So some of the procedural issues,
Wasn't that we did it wrong,
Mhm.
they just couldn't tell if we were doing it right.
right,
Yeah.
We
because
just didn't-
initially, when we started, we had temporary checks.
Mhm.
And it seems like we got like 12 of them, just, right off the top of my head, that was.
I think we had got a couple times,
It was
a
Well,
couple dozen,
few
yeah,
times.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, so we got the first 12,
right,
0 through 12. And then when we got the next batch, they started out with one again. So we had multiple
Oh,
check number
number for
ones,
one.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I think that happened like 3 times before we finally got the name change through. And then even though we got the name change through, we still couldn't order checks because
right.
we didn't have all the documentation. Yeah. So, yeah, it was just a matter of checks and balances. They couldn't tell, we had everything documented, but they couldn't tell just by looking at it that we'd only used that check one time.
Yeah.
But the fiscal policy will address a lot of that.
do I have a motion to approve the financial report?
So moved.
We have a motion by Mike, do I have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Janice. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none.
Aye.
Thanks, Sarah. Any public comment for on agenda items?
Aye.
Do we have anything come in? No, okay.
Oh, yes, one public comment actually did come in the other day through email. Public, member of the public that looks or watches the YouTube video says he's not sure who is who during the meetings because the camera angle doesn't show your guys' nameplates. So he was wondering if there was any way that the board can can like introduce themselves or anything like that during speaking.
Yeah, we can do that. Recognize for the online.
Not sure I can remember.
Remembering to do that's gonna be a little bit of a
Right.
change in process, but that's fine. So let's go ahead and jump into our new business. We have 3 items tonight. We have 7.1 accounting and financial policy and procedure manual, 7.2 executive committee, and 7.3 reasonable modification policy. So for discussion, because they're intertwined, I kind of want to tackle 7.1 and 7.2 in the same conversation. However, we will take those on 2 separate votes. So 7.1 accounting and financial policy and procedure manual. Want to give us a overview real quick, and then we'll go into board discussion. Sure.
So our financial policy and procedure manual, when we went through our site review, we didn't get dinged on anything. We were in compliance. But what we did realize is we still had the Douglas County Transportation District. We had never updated it to Umpqua Public Transportation District. So as we started through the process of updating that DCTD to UPTD, we handed it over to Sherry because we have a financial manager now. And so as she was going through it, she had a lot of questions, and we looked at the fact that we had done the original policy. I believe it was from the county that we had.
No, it was from the Walla Walla Indian tribe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I did not realize that.
Yeah, I think, yeah. That's right,
So.
it might have been also one that, I think also had Nooner Davidson kind of adjusted.
Worked on it,
too.
yeah.
There was a lot of
Yeah.
neuter
Yeah.
in that one.
Yeah. So, and Sherry engaged ODOT, Jennifer Boardman, in conversation. And Jennifer provided an example policy that had gone through site review and received rave reviews. And so we opted to go ahead and revise that policy instead, because it is more specific to what we do. And so Sherry really took point on that, and she went through and made all of the revisions that needed to be made initially. And then I went through, and we already had just passed our procurement policy. So I removed most of the information pertaining to procurement and had it direct to the procurement policy that we just put in place. And then Sherry went back through again to make the table of contents all match. And
All the page numbers.
yeah, so
Since she removed a big section of the procurement, it changed all of that.
and then Christine went through it even again. So we've been through it multiple times. We did just this evening find a, it said on the 15th. It's in one of these
I don't
that
know.
I've, so we did find one that has a TH following the number, but it shouldn't. So we'll correct that. But what I did is I went,
The first, in other words.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
yeah. So I tagged the various different places throughout the policy that refer to the executive committee. And the executive committee has some really specific purposes in this policy. Like the first place that it is mentioned is in the resolution of conflicts of interest. And it is also in the investigative responsibilities and confidentiality. And talks about how the executive committee will treat everything that they do with confidentiality. Disclosure to outside parties, it's covered in there, and card user responsibilities. What we did is we had Christine go through and she searched executive committee. And so then we marked them all to make sure that we got them all. It also, any unexplained deviations found as a result of internal audit procedures would be reported to the chair of the executive committee. And the executive committee is really a check and balance for us as a whole. It would most likely include Sherry and myself and at least one other person, if not two, but a minimum of 3 people. But it needs to include somebody other than me to hold me accountable. It needs to include somebody who's not involved in finance to hold finance accountable. And then it should probably include a board member as well. And Christine found
The bylaws,
mhm,
so the ex officio board member has to be on it, or around it.
So
Yes.
typically on board committees, which this would be a committee, typically staff are not members. That doesn't mean they don't attend or can't attend, but typically they're not members of a committee.
And the way that I read through this, I would strongly encourage that, because the executive committee is actually there to hold the general manager accountable.
Exactly.
And so it would create a complete conflict of interest in itself.
Yeah, usually it's like 3 committee members. Like it might be the chair, the vice chair, and somebody else is kind of typically how something like that would work. And it also allows them to work sometimes some issues and not have to do it here.
Mhm.
And then bring that to the board, full board for consideration and a vote.
And that's the way I typically see it
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
So I actually went through the policy. I have a slew of things here. So if we don't mind, I'd like to kind of go through those a little bit. So I guess on page 2, the first thing I have is on board and director committee structure. We list out special transportation improvement fund, STIF advisory committee, and we list out the budget committee. However, being this is now included in here and it has some significant role, it should probably be listed on that as number 3 as an executive committee as well.
Yep.
On page 4, a similar thing, where other officers, employees of Umpqua Public Transportation District who have financial responsibilities are as follows. Because of the way that the audits flow through the executive committee, we may want to have them listed in there because they do have a financial responsibility in the process. So they probably want to be added into that section as well.
Say it again.
So underneath that section, it says general manager, finance manager, operations manager, chair, board level, and then board of directors.
Where are you looking? Am I?
Page 4.
Right
Right
here.
here at
Okay,
the
okay,
top.
I'm looking right at, okay.
So adding the executive committee because they have a direct responsibility within the finance process.
Yes.
Page 10. So the first bullet underneath resolution of conflict of interest, the executive committee shall be responsible for making all decisions concerning resolution of conflicts involving directors, the general manager, and other members of senior management. I would change that, the general manager. That really falls underneath the board of directors. And so I don't think it should be fall underneath the executive committee.
I think it can fall underneath the executive committee because it's made up of a few board members. So you're just making, I don't know if it's something that you would bring back to the board, but it seems like that would be something they could discuss in terms of.
This is actually making the decision on the resolution though. And as a board, I think the board should make that decision.
The board is the decision. Yeah, right. Okay.
So
I think there's a role for the exec, there could be a role for the executive.
They would make the
committee.
recommendation, but the
Yeah.
board would make the decision.
Exactly.
Yes.
So
Oh, I see. So it would be for making, instead of making all decisions,
The board of directors shall be responsible for making all decisions concerning resolutions involving,
but the executive
The-
committee would be
May-
for recommendation.
may provide a recommendation. I don't think they have to provide a recommendation because sometimes they just come up in a board meeting
Right.
and we can resolve it right here real quick without having to have an executive meeting. An executive committee may, if there's issues and it's like, it's something that maybe comes up periodically, we're not sure. And maybe they provide some clarity, recommendation around that to determine whether that's a true conflict of interest or something we should be concerned about.
So basically
I think-
this, to readdress that, I would just move that general manager to the next bullet down where it says the board chair, actually shouldn't be the board chair, that's one other thing. The board, I don't think the chair should make any decisions solely. That's my position on that. It should be a congruent, the board chair by himself doesn't hold any power, it's within the board. So that second bullet should be the board shall be responsible for making all decisions concerning resolutions of conflict involving executive committee members. And then in there, I'd move the general manager into that second bullet. And then remove subject to approval by the general manager. I'd strike that.
So what would you do on the first bullet then?
Just take out general manager
Just take it out, okay.
and drop it down to that
Yeah,
second bullet.
okay.
On page 13. Underneath investigative responsibilities, says the executive committee has the primary responsibility for investigating suspected misconduct involving general manager and executive level positions. depending on what the makeup of the executive board I would strike that as well as the board members and officers. If it is made up of the board itself, so the officers and maybe an ex officio, I could leave that in there. But if we're gonna have employees, then it shouldn't be in there where an employee is holding a board member accountable.
Correct.
Page 4,
So just strike that last part of that.
I
sentence.
would, because underneath and on page 47 in here, it's
So
specific-
before you leave that page though, just one other, just in terms of making sure that we're using the same terminology in here. This talks about involving employees below this general manager and executive management level, but over on the other one, it was senior.
Yeah.
It's called senior management. So just using the same terms.
Okay,
um,
and
throughout.
senior level positions.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you guys don't need to go here. I'll just read it for you.
Which page are you on?
Well, I'm just gonna, on
47.
page 47, it says, in the event a member of the board of directors violates the standards of conduct in this section, the matter will be referred to the board for disposition. Disciplinary actions may lead action up to and including removal from the board. So basically what that's saying is the board is responsible for taking care of any issues with a board member. They make that decision.
So can we remove an elected person from the board?
No,
I don't think we can.
And that needs to be changed then, because this is saying we can.
all that you can do is file a recall. The general manager would have to file a recall to remove the board member.
So we're gonna need to make a modification, page 47.
This one right here,
Up to including removal that would have to.
last sentence. Very last sentence. of that.
Because I think our bylaws do.
I thought we
Address
did-
that part.
I
yeah.
thought we said that at first, and we took that out because I thought we said we determined we couldn't do that.
Yes.
That's what I remember, yeah. I don't believe it in our bylaws.
No, the part that's in the bylaws is if somebody is on the board would receive,
There's things that can be done.
Right.
And that are punitive in nature, but don't involve removal of the person as a board member. It could include removal for them attending in person or something with their disruptive personality, things like
Yeah, the
that.
chair can remove them, but they
Yeah.
cannot remove them from the board. They can remove them from a meeting,
Yes,
but not remove them from the board.
exactly.
Page 30. Gift acceptance. Which is the first paragraph. Says gifts of marginal risk may be accepted by the general manager without any further review and approval. Gifts of greater than marginal risk may be accepted only after review and approval by both the board chair and general manager. Looking at the definition of what a
Marginal risk.
well, actually the gift of greater than marginal risk, I would say that should probably come to the board for acceptance on those big ones. And so I would have that the board would make those decisions.
Absolutely.
Of the board.
Yes.
Okay.
There's also a typo there. Can you, I don't know if you noticed, but there's a typo in that paragraph where it says broad chair rather than board chair.
You're right.
Chair's got to be abroad.
Good catch on that.
That's where when I read it so many times, it always
Yeah.
looks like it's
It looks
right.
fine.
Yeah.
Page 81. In here you have software, computer software, 2 to 3 years. I think that's a bit low. I would probably say that you can get a piece of software that'll last at least 3 years. So I would change the lifespan of computer software 3 to 5 to match computer hardware. That's through the,
Doesn't software really need to be,
this is for the depreciation of it though.
oh, for the depreciation,
Yeah.
Oh,
the
gotcha.
cost?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry.
What is it typically? Do you know? What depreciation? Okay.
I mean, we're only adding a year and pushing it out, but I
Yeah.
think 2 years for depreciation on a Swiss, I mean, I've always used software more than 2 years. I'd be switching out every other year.
But that doesn't mean that's what a depreciation schedule would be.
This is under depreciation, so that's what,
This was a policy and procedure that we got from Coos Bay,
sure.
that Jennifer Borland said
Yeah.
went through.
Typically, you're only gonna depreciate
Yeah.
out expensive software, and so those will typically have a longer life. You know, a 1995 piece that you pick up at Staples, you're not gonna depreciate that. But a $2,000 piece of software, you're gonna depreciate that, and those will typically last more than 2 years.
But you could depreciate it out and still be using it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Um,
Bonnie, what do you do with your time? That you have time to be this specific?
I do a
Unlike-
lot of this in my job.
So you just see it?
Yes.
And I can only make, subtle recommendations, but this kind of stuff. you
Yeah,
guys
yeah.
can.
Yeah, there's a problem with his mind.
I just skimmed it. That'd be administrative rules.
Okay, 93. On page 93, it talks about on a quarterly basis, the board of directors will be provided a summary program and or grant financial information. We get that monthly. And so I would change that to monthly distribution just
Okay.
because we get it monthly anyway. Page 102. This is something I don't want to meddle on in internal operations, but typically the way I've seen it is the financial director does the planning and kind of delegation for the audits. And so that planning where it says the general manager is responsible for delegating and assigning the responsibilities to accounting staff. I typically see that done by the finance director.
So I just assign it to the financial staff.
The general manager is the budget officer for the district.
Says the general manager shall review the list of information requested by the auditors and assign responsibility for each item of the appropriate staff. General manager shall then schedule and direct status meetings in the weeks leading up to the audit. I mean, I'm assuming that it's sure that does that. I mean,
Oh, I see.
102 page, the first paragraph.
Wow.
Yes.
I mean, the general manager shall arrange, coordinate any and all meetings, interviews, telephone discussions, and conference calls requested by the, I mean, I'm assuming that the communication with the auditor is going to be shared.
Yes.
So that's what this.
It is now.
It is, yeah.
So that's-
And so I didn't change it because I wasn't
Right.
sure.
Yes.
So
So you could say the general manager or financial manager.
I mean, the way that this is reading here, the general manager obviously directs the financial director, but the way this is reading is it's the audit process right now. The general
Okay.
manager is doing it all through these 2 paragraphs. I would say that it would actually, I'd recommend it be the finance director on that.
Well, you could say the general manager, her delegate. or the
I would
delegate,
put the
something like
finance
that.
director and then
Yeah.
we have the staff
Yeah.
person, so.
Okay.
Yeah, because the general manager should not be doing hardly any of that.
Not anymore, man.
103, next page. This is under internal control deficiencies noted during an audit. The organization's independent auditor are required to provide written communication to the executive committee. This all depends on where this is at in the process. I think I'm fine with that. However, ultimately, in the document, it also says the board of directors is the approver of it. So where that lands as far as who their communication is directed to. And again, where it falls within what the executive committee makeup is. If it's gonna be, and that's kind of why we must need to think about the executive committee, what the makeup's gonna be prior to approving this, just so that we know what that's gonna look like, because it will change some of the language in the makeup of this document, in my opinion.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, so I think it's okay to have that in there because the executive committee would work or discuss issues.
yeah, and I'm like I
And
said,
make
I'm-
recommendations.
I was on the fence on that one there. I have a question mark next to it because I'm on the fence when it kind of depends on what the makeup of the executive committee is. If it's the chair, vice chair, and an ex officio or something along that lines, I'm totally fine with it.
Yeah.
So we'll leave that one as is for right now. 105, and this is my last one. This has to do with the limits on insurance. I'm seeing a lot underneath the umbrella liabilities. 2 to 5 is becoming more of a standard from what I'm seeing versus 1 to 4. Comprehensive liability for a per case is usually starts at $1 million, but for the umbrellas, which is a catch-all, usually I see 2 to 5 on those.
We don't actually currently have an umbrella. We only have everything else.
Really?
At several high and excluded limits. We don't have, everything's at the top tier. Anything past that point will require an umbrella. At this time, we don't require an umbrella.
I would have an umbrella. I mean, because what that does is, you only have a per incident for comprehensive of $1 million. That's your limit. But when you have an umbrella, which overlays everything,
Right.
it adds that layer of additional coverage on there.
Right.
So,
Yeah, no, I did talk with William about
Mhm.
adding one on there, but
I've never worked any place that didn't have an umbrella, just for the security of it.
So 2 to 5.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then underneath employee dishonesty and bonding, typically, and maybe it's because we're volunteering, we're listed somewhere else, but typically a board is also listed within that,
Mhm.
typically E&Os. So I got that on there.
And we do have that.
policy, yeah.
Yeah.
So I just list them on there.
It has directors and officers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it is listed actually.
Directors.
I missed it. Where's?
It's a third from the bottom,
Yeah, under fire.
just above theft.
Oh, okay.
There you go. It's right
So
there.
it's unlisted now, okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. So
It catches.
based on that, I'm gonna ask that we can do that. But I'd like to go ahead and take care of the executive committee and have that discussion and maybe approve that tonight. I like Mike's suggestion of having it as the chair, vice chair, and
At large or somebody, something like that.
yeah, or our legal counsel or an ex officio, or I mean,
You could do like a chair, vice chair, past chair. I know John's not on the board, but as it rotates and stuff, that's another way that I've
Yeah.
seen it done.
Yeah, because I'm real
Something like that.
uncomfortable with concentrating power.
Sure.
And was real worried about it, and I didn't want to approve it, but it's just splattered all over this new financial policy. So if we have to have it, I would like it to be broader
Mhm.
than just the chair, vice chair, and anybody else. I would like more eyes on the situation. I don't like it being, if we had a 50-member board and we had an executive committee, it would be 7 people. And so we're not that big that we really need an executive committee.
do we still have a contract with Muner? Or do we, when we hire chair, do we get rid of that?
We still have a contract so that we can reach out to them.
We could have a member from them, maybe if they'd be willing.
Laura would probably do it.
That way we have a financial representation on the executive committee. Would that make you feel
And
better?
I just, do we have to limit it to 3? Can't it be 4?
Well, you only have to limit it to 3 if it's all board members, because. you
Okay,
can't
so if
have-
You can't have
You
a-
can't have more than 4 because it becomes a board meeting at that point.
So
Right, yeah, I wanted it to be beyond board.
Mhm.
And I wanted it to be more people. Because I just think that consolidating power is not
It's not
a
about
wise
power though.
idea.
It's not about power. So
Who says?
whatever.
What?
So if we have it to 4, will we add because it'll rotate, I mean, when I'm no longer chair, I mean, I'm off of it, so it won't be a one
It
person, it
yeah.
rotates around.
It's about.
And if we add that
consolidating.
4th person from an outside, would you feel comfortable?
Yeah.
Okay.
I like that better. I just,
So I guess it all depends on how you want to use your executive committee. So if you're limiting it only to the financial, then maybe that works. Although my concern is we have a contract with Nooner Davidson for assistance and communicating things right now because we're sort of still transitioning things and get the history and things like that. But eventually that will go away. One reason we want that to go away with Nooner Davidson is it'd be nice for them to do the financial audits and things like that being in town. So it makes it real easy for them to do. They do most government agencies.
If they were on this, they couldn't do the others too.
Exactly. So that puts a conflict there. But again, how do you use your executive? So sometimes there are issues and things you want to discuss and work without having to spend a lot of board time doing that, so that you can go through that and then you can explain that. You can kind of spend all that time working things out and the problem, and then bring it to the board that's ready for a recommendation and see where the board wants to go.
but
approval.
interpretation, it becomes through one voice.
Not really. It's about leadership. It's about a smaller group of people gathering the information to present
Consolidation
to the
of
rest of
power.
us.
It's
No, it's not nothing to do
consolidation
with
of power because
power.
they decide what
No,
the
they
channel
don't.
is.
No, they don't.
Yeah, they do.
No, they don't. They,
Actually, in here, they do make some decisions.
some, but they
Not-
present it to the rest of us.
It's a slippery slope.
No. Disagree.
I just think, there could be opportunities to use the executive committee if you've got one for other situations. A recruitment, for example, would be one that would come to mind. Or other big issues. Anyway, I just, and at that point, I think it ought to be board members only on the committee. So I'm not sure I would want to, I don't mind having a financial person, but I don't know that I want it to be somebody that we have a contract with now that we won't later, might be,
Right.
I think that's problematic.
So the makeup of the executive committee is for discussion and the number.
Yes,
Well, I think the number ought to be 3 if it's members, so that there's no majority.
And I
There.
don't want it to be that many members.
Well, I mean, if you had if you usually don't have committees of even numbers, because if you're discussing and you disagree, then
And you gotta tie.
you get tied with
That's-
this,
So then
which is
we
always a
need-
no.
maybe we need 5.
So you always have an
We
odd
can't-
number
we can't go
usually.
that- We can't do 5.
Why can't we do 5?
Is it-
There
that's a
isn't a
quorum.
rule.
That's a quorum. it'd
Then
be
you
a
have a
meeting.
quorum.
No, it would be a quorum if it is directors. It's not a quorum if it's a different type of people, 2 directors and adjunct people. Okay, that's not a quorum.
I think if you have 2 directors, I would only, and you had somebody from the outside, I would only have 1 other person. Because, you want to help promote and it's the directors that know generally what's going on in the agency. So stop having having a majority of people from outside an agency telling an agency how to do or decide things seems kind of wonky.
I just want them looking at it from different angles.
Question. If you were one of the members with 2 other random board members, would you feel comfortable if you were a part of that committee?
I'm not sure. I would expect to be hearing back as a board member, hearing back both sides, not a siphon, not a not a funnel. And different eyes on whatever it is we're discussing. And like Mike says, it should be limited in what sort of things we have the executive committee do. So I just don't want it to be a concentration of opinions or a concentration of, I'm not, if Janice doesn't like power, then it's a concentration of ideology.
I like leadership. I don't like the word power. Like,
I'm not-
like
I
these
am
people
part
have
of
power.
leadership.
We're all just volunteers, and I like leadership, and I like having leaders that, because I'm new, I like people they're obviously know what they've been doing this kind of thing for a long
We're going
time.
to discuss
And
that
I
a
would
little
like
later.
them to be able to go over things and kind of explain them to me better and be the ones that are my go-to people that can explain it to me, and then I can have a better idea of how things work. And I don't have all day to take all this in, either. So I view it as a leadership role, not as a power role, but as a leadership role. There's a difference.
Well, they can become one and the same.
Yeah, exactly. It's not, they don't have the power necessarily in everything, but they've got the ability to be able to help me as a board member.
I mean, they really don't have
Yeah.
power at all. I mean,
No.
they're an arbiter a little bit in terms of conflicts of interest, which is generally pretty simple and very specific circumstances. But that's not really providing a direction or policy or any of that.
It really only lists 9 incidents within the policy, different incidents
It's
that
very
I think the
limited.
concern is though that, like Mike's saying, that it can be used for other things, which I've seen it used a lot as sounding boards to make recommendations to the larger board. The fear is that it becomes the board versus the board being the board. And that's where the power issue comes in.
Yeah.
And so there has
I've
to be
seen
some
that happen too,
sideboards on how much an executive committee can do.
Mhm.
And I believe that when we do this, I believe it should probably be drafted up somewhere in a document that the executive committee has limited authority, limited to that outlined in here, in the financial document, and maybe a few other things where they can make recommendations for the full board. But there needs to be some sideboards on it.
And some limitations, how
Yeah.
often they meet.
Exactly.
And because I have seen that. So when Umpqua Regional Council of Governments ran the transit system many decades ago, sometimes they relied on the executive committee too much
Mhm.
and would run with that. I was going to suggest that we draft bylaws. So that if we have an executive committee, we draft a set of bylaws, and that I think would spell out, a lot of
Yeah.
what Lonnie's talking
So
about.
then you don't have the problem with the power thing like she's thinking.
Yeah, I mean, you could meet quarterly as as needed, but no more than quarterly. I mean, if you were gonna do that, I just don't think there's that much stuff.
Right.
To talk about or do. You may not meet at all in a year.
And you can have it to where there's
Yeah.
mandatory minutes that have to be taken, which are then
Yes.
reviewed by the board.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, so I think that would limit it and spell things out.
So let's do this. Let's go ahead and table that along with the revision. We'll come back, bring it back to the next meeting. We can have maybe an example of bylaws or something along the lines, just so we can kind of see what this thing's gonna shape up like and go from there.
Yeah.
So,
that sounds good.
So moved. Whatever that is.
okay, everybody go with that?
Yep.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, 7.3, reasonable modification policy.
Okay.
Sure.
So the reasonable modification policy is, it's like a next step. We have a reasonable modification procedure that has been in place for years. Honestly, it's been in place since like 2012. But we didn't actually have it written into a policy. So although our procedures were correct, the actual piece that the site review was asking us to correct was to ensure that the general public had access to how to file or request a reasonable modification. So to ensure that we have the forms on all of our buses, and the information is on the website and available if somebody were to walk into the office. And in addition, do training with our drivers and people that are public facing to ensure that they understand what's appropriate.
Does it come in multiple languages?
Not yet.
That's something I did not see and wondered if it was going to be standard, if the state requires it. Or if we're gonna do it because we have a lot of Asian people here that don't speak English.
So
We do.
There's a pretty good
We
band.
actually do. I've seen
Yeah.
a lot of Asian people that don't speak. Yeah. that's
Yes.
Interesting.
Have you
Yeah,
talked to
I
them?
hadn't thought of that.
It's pretty prevalent.
I'm married to one.
Yeah.
I was working for the
Yeah,
casino.
parks
everybody
and things
then,
like
I
that. I
guess.
I run into them at Stewart Park all the time.
The casino
Yeah.
actually hires a lot of them.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So one is everybody.
I've seen that. There's a lot of old, especially older.
And
Especially
they're largely invisible to the public because we had this kind of discussion early on when we were doing the bylaws of how many languages it should come in. And they are invisible because they don't go anywhere because they're afraid to go somewhere. But they don't have anybody to lead them because they're very insular. And I think that some of our Asian languages, if that's appropriate,
Most probably Hispanic as well,
as well,
Yeah.
but
the,
that's very popular.
which
and
is a
it's- and
higher,
it's
probably a
done.
higher number, but yeah.
Yeah.
yes,
That's actually the recognized, I think the state of Oregon recognizes
For
the
the-
English and Spanish.
for
Mhm.
the LEP.
Yeah.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
So, no, I had not looked into having it available in multiple languages, but that is absolutely something that we can look into.
So the Asian, there's like a million different Asian languages.
Yes,
Is
there
there, do you
are.
have any in
So we
mind or?
There's a lot of Japanese is what I run into.
If you
There's
go to
two different
DHS,
But you're right.
There's two different
DHS
kinds
has-
of Japanese.
and your social security papers come with multiple languages, just with the summary that they can go somewhere on the internet to read it, the actual.
There are translation
Yes.
services online. and
Yeah, and I think
they'll
that
translate
is
all the
something that we
documents.
could include more languages and more of the dialects, but DHS does it all the time. And I know they're bigger.
It's a
A
lot.
little bit.
It's a little bit bigger.
Is there a local organization that works with refugees or immigrants that would know what languages would be pretty good to put in here?
That's a good idea.
DHS might have some idea. Other than that, I'm not sure if there's
I mean,
any.
you might check, with some of the, community planning or something like that, because that's something that they have to address many times. So maybe Roseburg or Sutherland and, I don't know, Lonnie, if you know.
We don't have to-
And I don't know if you know, but we're probably gonna
Winston, I
get
know
some
that.
Afghans here too.
It's a possibility.
Yes.
So the policy is just for the company,
Right.
for the district and our employees. But what we're talking about is ensuring that the public facing materials are in more than one language.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Please.
That's pretty simple because it consists of 3 questions. For them to define what it is that they would like as an accommodation
Okay.
or a reasonable accommodation. And then does it create a direct threat? Does it change our decision-making process? Does it create a direct threat? Does it change the way that we conduct business? And is it due to the fact that you have a disability? Because the reasonable modification policy is for people with disabilities. So, that makes it pretty easy to define those 3 sentences. This
Yeah,
is
Is it a
how we.
reasonable modification or a reasonable accommodation?
Reasonable modification, because we're specifically talking about modification of services.
Okay.
The accommodation is more for employees. And so initially, the policy had said reasonable accommodation on part of it and reasonable modification on the other part. But modification is the part that we were required to put out there.
Is the resolution still 7 or is it 5 or 6? since we didn't do the first two.
I think we can leave the numbers assigned and just pass 7, can't we?
Just asking.
Five.
Yeah.
So they're in order because there's no guarantee the other ones will ever be.
True. You want to make that motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion to approve resolution 21.5, adopting reasonable modification policy.
A motion on the floor, Mike,
I'll second.
with a second from Sarah. Thank you. Any more discussion? Hearing none, I'll take it to vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, pass unanimously. Item number 8, old business, 8.1, vaccine discussion.
Well, and we've had some changes since last meeting too. So the initial vaccine discussion that we were looking at was the possibility of offering incentive for employees that had not yet been vaccinated, and whether or not that would make a difference. And so for the last meeting, which I do apologize for not being able to attend the last meeting, I would have been available by phone, but by the time I called Christine, it was over. So what I had provided is just this one piece of paper. It's the same piece of paper as we had last time.
Oh, okay.
So I had a discussion, we had multiple meetings for other purposes, and as part of that meeting, we talked with each of the groups of employees and asked them if they would anonymously just put a check in the I am vaccinated or not vaccinated column, and if they were checking the not vaccinated column, would there be any incentive that they would be willing to accept in order to be vaccinated. And so we did have 2 people that said that they would be willing to accept a
Vaccination
what's
protocol.
it? So one of them said that if Pelosi and another one were
Yeah.
to
Schumer.
out of their own pockets pay, I think it was $1 million, $1 million each. They at that point, they would go ahead and get vaccinated.
I think that's a pretty solid no.
Let me call them up.
Yeah.
I guess so. Submit an email.
It's only 2 million each.
Yeah, so that's what I
They can
had put
afford
at
it.
the very bottom.
They
that
got
it
rich off
was
everybody else.
Unrealistic, that,
Yeah.
what they wanted was unrealistic. But as we had the discussion, every single person that was vaccinated, they're like, so if you start offering this incentive, does it go retroactive? Do I get
And that
that?
is something that I would want to know too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And usually they do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're gonna give $500. Am I gonna get $500 too?
I can tell you at the last company I worked for, they did that. They
Had to go retro.
people went and got vaccinated
State
when
did
the
that too.
vaccines first started
So
coming
you
out.
open the
and
door
then
to that and
They didn't get enough of the employees, so then they started offering incentives, and then the vaccinated people were like, well, I did the right thing, you know, and
mhm.
then
Yes.
now you're.
Now being penalized.
And then-
Yeah,
and
you're
then
penalizing
if you
me for
don't
doing
want-
there's
the
a
right
question
thing
about
ahead of
the
time.
right thing
Right, well,
between people.
I'm just saying, that's what they were
Right.
saying, oh, I
Yeah,
did the right
they
thing.
were
and-
saying, yeah.
And they said, you know, if
Yeah.
you're gonna give them, you're basically rewarding
Right.
the bad people.
Yeah, I think, I think when the
What they
state
were
did it,
saying,
they,
so It
they-
opened up a whole can of worms.
the
Yeah,
state
I
just
just
gave
think-
it out to everybody that got a vaccination by a certain date. So even if you had already been vaccinated prior to that, months before, you know,
Yeah.
I
everybody
think
got it
it's a
if you were
huge
vaccinated by
mistake
date.
to offer anything like that because it just, like you said, opens a can of worms. And it also is treating people like children, I think. So, here's a cookie if you take your medicine. So I think it's just really beneath.
A spoonful of
Have
sugar.
you taken a
Us?
survey to find out how, you said you did, how many, what is the percentage of?
So we,
Vaccinated.
of the people that took the survey, 51.72% are already vaccinated.
So is that population of your entire employment and staff?
So at that point, we had 38. Now I think we're at 37. We did lose one employee, moved out of state.
So 18 people are
Vaccinated.
vaccinated. Okay.
But all they have to do is get an exemption too, right? Are they willing to apply for that or
Well,
not?
okay, so here's the interesting thing. With the thing that happened with the federal government coming out with a mandate through the federal OSHA. I actually managed to get into the initial Department of Labor phone call where they went through they're calling it the emergency temporary standard. So they went through all
no
of it.
ending?
Pardon?
Yeah, sorry, with no end date, yeah. Or
Yeah.
public involvement, but yeah.
Well, it's only temporary until the 30 days of comments are they're trying to, it's not just a temporary standard, it is being put forth as a permanent standard. Yeah,
I would be cautious to do anything with this until it gets settled out through the Supreme Court.
yes.
It's being heard, it's been lawsuits filed by, last I heard, 11 states. It's being heard by, I think, 4 district courts.
I think
Because
one or
it's-
2 courts have ruled against it
Yeah,
already.
Right.
Because it's
Yes.
unconstitutional.
It doesn't
And
apply
then-
here, or nights are good, so.
No matter
Well,
how
no,
you
the
feel
night's
about
not-
it, it's
But then
unconstitutional.
it'll eventually work its way up to the Supreme Court. So I wouldn't do anything at this point until, or anything that's gonna be federally OSHA related
Yep.
until after it settles out through the courts.
So state of Oregon has 30 days to either comply and adopt these.
I thought they had 6 months to write their rules, because their rules can be
Well, they have.
more restrictive.
Well, they have 30 days to either adopt this or put forth that they're gonna to adopt more stringent rules.
And the reason I was thinking they might be a little more stringent is the federal OSHA rules allow you to test
Mhm.
weekly, something
Yeah.
like that. And when the governor did her executive order for executive agency employees, that was not provided as an option. And it was discussed and they decided not to do it. It was, you get vaccinated or you don't work for the state. And so I'm wondering if they're gonna go more stringent in that instance than federal OSHA.
So if they go with the way that federal OSHA has it set up, then we actually have funding available to us to purchase the PCR tests in bulk. And it would be really, really easy to add a piece into our current COVID policy that addresses testing and whether or not you're vaccinated. And well, testing and masks. If you're not vaccinated, you would have to also wear masks.
Exemptions are still allowed, right, under federal OSHA or not? Are you saying they're not allowed? I can't get a religious or a.
Federal, they are.
They are
right?
allowed.
Yeah,
But it doesn't.
I think they are in
we
the
don't
state
know.
one too.
I would think the state has it.
Yeah.
So I would think that's gonna stay.
Well, there have been a lot of places that just said that they won't accept any exemptions and they're also getting lawsuits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess
How you
my-
don't.
Where I stand on this is right now, it's, who knows what's gonna happen federally. The state hasn't said anything. I would leave it alone until the rules are printed. And then at that point in time, they're gonna give you a period of time to implement. I say we address it at that point in time. Let the
Okay.
personal decision be the person's decision.
Mhm.
Awesome. I'm very glad to hear that because right now we have a solid crew
Mhm.
and it would be,
Detrimental to do anything else.
yeah.
I would make sure that they know that an exemption, they can get an exemption from the requirement. And I would make sure that I've got the paperwork and whatever, and I've gone through that, and the requirement is medical. And you can get the forms online, so you can see it online and get that. And of course, that requires a doctor, and you're probably not gonna get a lot of those, but maybe you have some. And then there's religious, which is pretty simple, and that's what most people apply for. And as long as it has to be a sincerely held belief. So you can't say on your religion one, well, the government can't tell me what to do.
Right.
That's not a sincerely held religious belief, but you could say, you can make, oh, my body's a temple, blah, 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 and just say a couple sentences.
Some scripture.
This religion, something,
Right.
and I mean, it should be simple, and so I
The
would,
state form is a 1-pager and it
It's
asks for
simple.
little to no information.
Exactly.
And check the box and you're done.
And as long as it's not, as long as it's somewhere in the religious realm of something basic, they get approved. As
Yeah,
long as it,
we can't score it on a 0 to 5.
no, you can't
Yeah.
score it at all.
How it is. So
Yeah,
But,
they just have to say.
But right now, we don't need to do anything with it because the rules haven't been passed. So I was just,
because
Yeah.
I've had a couple of people bring the ones that they printed off of OHA
Mhm.
and
Yeah, OHA,
and
yeah.
offer them to me. And I just told them, we're not at that spot yet.
Yep.
And if we get to that spot, the one on the Oregon Health Authority website says.
watch a video or
exception.
something.
It's exception, not exemption.
Mhm.
And the difference between an exception and an exemption is you might be an exception to the rule this time, but that could change. But an exemption means I'm exempt from the rule.
Yeah.
So it's two different things and it's kind of misleading. So I just told them, let's just wait.
yeah, just leave it alone for
Yeah.
now. So
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna kind of leave it there. I mean, I don't think we really need to worry about anything else on that one there. I
Okay.
mean,
We can get the tests though. and we
Unless
have
the state
funding
takes
and
action or is proposing the rule.
Right.
Well, yeah, at that point, that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
But right now, I think we just leave it alone. If the state says we have to do this, then we start addressing these.
I
other
don't think it's
matters.
gonna pass muster.
I don't
I don't
know.
think so. I don't think so.
Okay, item number 9, general, thanks for briefing us on that. It's important stuff. And so, I think we need to kind of keep in our back of our minds what's happening and, I'm glad to bring it up. But right now, I think we're in a good place where luckily we don't have to do much with it. So,
That's what I feel. We're very blessed not to have to deal with it right now.
General manager report.
Alrighty, so we have ridership numbers. And the ridership is going up slightly, but it is still, we're still only at about 50% of what our ridership was pre-COVID, which I had actually thought that it would go up a little bit faster than it has, simply because the gas prices are through the roof right now. And so there are a lot of people that, I know that when it was $4 a gallon before, and I was in an entry level position, I couldn't afford to drive back and forth all the time. And we had a lot of people that rode the bus because they couldn't afford to maintain a vehicle anymore, So I had anticipated that we would see that rise in ridership a little bit sooner. But the other difference is we didn't have commute to work or work from home options then either.
Yeah.
And we didn't have online classes and meetings and things like that available either. So I think that COVID and the whole Zoom or Teams meetings that are available online has really changed the way we do business and we do life in general. So that ridership number, I don't think is really going to change until we are offering far better service, and we're so close.
I just wonder how much, the factory jobs, the in-person jobs that can't be done remotely, do we go there? Do we go there often enough? Roseburg Forest Products, the casino, the hospital, places where you can't do it remote. Should we be looking at that? Should we increase ridership there?
So Kat, I was driving down 99 the other day from Southland, just something different than I-5. And it takes you through Wilbur.
Mhm.
And I noticed the stop, in Wilbur. So there's a little stop up there with a store. But then there's FCC Commercial Furniture, which is right there with a lot of employees. And I kind of thought, well, why wouldn't we have the stop over by FCC where we could grab some of their employees and ride, still kind of in town to capture the residents, but maybe you're taking people, to your point,
There were several
more to the
businesses,
work and things like that want to get there.
Yep.
I'm not traveling ever to Wilbur from here. And so very few people, I would think, would ride it And
they
it's a
do-
ways to walk from FCC. It's kind of on the other end of town.
Mhm.
But if you put it down a little bit, toward, certainly closer to FCC, that might be an opportunity. Things like that. That's
Yeah,
kind
how
of what I
many
was thinking.
businesses are out
Yeah.
there actually?
So
You've got
just-
big employers out there.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
adjusting some of the stop locations to
Well,
serve.
so we have the ability to flag stop in a lot of those places, but as we move to the closer to hourly service instead of commuter service, then we're able to actually list all of those stops. So they won't be a flag stop that you would only know about if you talked to your driver or called into the office. They would be flag, or they would be actual stops that are listed on the schedule with a time on the timetable.
So, but I don't want to go, so even if you had it on the timetable, and, even if it said that, I'm probably, when I work at FCC, I'm probably not necessarily going to take the bus to go to FCC, because it's a ways down. I don't want to walk that far in the rain. It's really not that convenient.
Where is FCC?
It's maybe a third of the way up into inside Wilbur there.
Yes, before you get to the grocery store, after the old elementary school.
Yeah,
It's on the freeway side. There's a road, is it Oak something that goes underneath the
That goes
freeway
up to
right in
Oak
front of
Valley.
them?
Yeah.
Oak Valley Loop Road, something like that. So I mean, there's just things like that for ridership.
there's also a Rinko's out there
Yes,
as
that's the
well.
one I was
Yeah.
trying to think of, in Southern Oregon Diesel. And
So some of these
Oh,
large,
okay.
some of these large employers and looking at putting some of the stops
Closer to them.
where I could ride to go to work and back, particularly when we go to a new, reduced headway
Yeah.
on our routes.
Coca-Cola.
And to
is
kind of
out
piggyback
there.
on that for South County, that's why I think that the South County route that we're proposing is so important, because a lot of people that work in Riddle, which is DR Johnson, Herbert
Mhm.
Lumber, RFP, the casino in Canyonville, live in Tri-City, live in Myrtle Creek, live in
Canyonville.
Canyonville. And so by having that circular route, it's hitting exactly what you're saying, is those people can ride to work.
Yeah.
Get up and then get back on the bus when they get done and go back
I
home.
mean, you have to
Yes.
make sure that the bus stops there when the shift change,
Ex-
and that it gets them there early enough
Yep.
to not get dinged for being late.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So what tends to happen with like our RFP stops is people will ride for 2 weeks or maybe even a month.
Mhm.
And then they get paid enough that they buy a car.
Oh, what a
Yeah,
shame.
So we've got stops at RFP that are early
But they're-
morning stops.
They're constantly hiring though.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
this is gonna bring me to my other point that I was gonna make, kind of tie in off of that. And that is, transit is the most difficult mode to take.
Mhm.
So I can get in a car, pretty much everybody knows how to drive a car. I can walk
Hitchhike.
two legs, or if I'm in a wheelchair, I can go. Personal mobility or a bicycle, very easy to go. Transit, what's a flag stop?
Yeah.
Is there somebody out
Mhm.
there waving? I don't know, people don't generally know those terms. They don't know where you stop. They don't know that we're gonna go to.
If there's not a
30
bus stop that's
minutes.
signed
Yeah.
and flashing lights, they're not
Yeah.
gonna know.
Yeah, they don't know that we're going to 30-minute. It just seems like we need to do some marketing.
That's
Um,
exactly what I was
so-
Yeah.
thinking, because I'm a marketing person.
Yeah.
I can't pull it up here
Uh-huh.
for you. But there is a video that I have forwarded to Brian
Mhm.
Pravitz.
Prowess.
Yeah, and just to ask him, what kind of cash outlay are we looking for if we were to do something similar to this for here? And it is bilingual.
excellent.
And it is people that are getting ready to get on the bus and they're asking.
What's the yellow cord on the bus?
Yes, can I pull this cord to?
What happens? Does it
ask
send
for a
alarm off?
stop? So it
Yeah.
is the question and the answer. And I had to laugh because the answer was, yes, you can.
Yeah.
And we're not you can anymore, but it would have been an amazing one to have
You
while we
can.
were still you can. Yes, you can. But it would still be, it addressed how to put your bike on the bus.
Yeah.
All of those kinds of things.
Because you feel like you're in a rush. So I haven't put my bike on the bus. It's like, I don't know what to do.
Do
You know,
you have a marketing budget? We have dollars allocated to marketing that
Well,
way.
and I also have a marketing plan, a grant,
Sure.
so to develop the marketing
I
plan.
think that's, to Mike's point, I think that's critical to get, because a lot of people don't realize what all riding the bus, what their opportunities.
I have to have, so an impediment nowadays is I have to have cash.
Yeah,
And I have to have exact cash, because I'm not gonna get, if I got a $5 bill and it's only $2 ride, well, I'm out $3.
Yeah.
You know,
Do
thank
they
you,
have a-
you know,
Swipe.
and they do have electronic, I mean,
That would be-
there's grants and things that you can get, I mean, so, but it'd be nice to, you know, people are more electronic. You know,
Mhm.
people use their debit cards or their whatever, they don't wanna have to go get the cash, I wanna pay exactly what I owe.
Not in
I have a
February.
change machine. I have 3 of them.
And
Yeah,
and then going,
cash
and then going to
pass.
the businesses, you know, it's an opportunity for them to provide passes, so maybe they buy some passes every month. And it's a benefit to their, it can be considered a pretty inexpensive benefit for their employees.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
you've got a way to provide something.
Yeah, when I was working at Lowe's, say for 6 rides, a lot of people would get rides to work.
Mhm.
Or they would ride their bikes or walk. I mean, there's just, that was it. I never heard anybody say, oh, I've got to catch the bus or
Yeah.
anything
No,
like that.
Because there's no bus over there.
Yeah,
No, it's a good half-mile walk into
Mhm.
either one of the bus
yeah,
stops.
in the
around there.
rain, nobody wants to do that.
yeah, they want to have it front door.
Yeah.
And I think there's one by
And it should
ODOT
be.
across the street, but I'm not sure.
There is.
Is there? Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't
there's
see it on the list.
actually one on each side. There's one before the
Oh,
light.
is there?
Yeah, on the airport side, and then there's
I don't work there
one.
anymore.
Yeah,
either.
because those Home Depot are right there. and They
We don't
don't
work
want
with
to
those.
lot
I
of-
work for
Yeah.
ODOT.
that are,
I
don't
work
have
at
a lot of
home.
money. They don't have
Oh.
transportation.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of screws that.
Yeah.
So this is all good discussion, but for the sake of time,
Yes.
I'll check.
Yeah.
Yes, so our ridership numbers, rides per hour is one of the metrics that they had highlighted in our site review that they wanted us to look at on a regular basis as to whether or not we're improving and so on and so forth. And we are improving. We are up to 3.17 rides per hour, rides per revenue service hour. And that is a combination of all modes. I can separate that out into fixed route, commuter route, demand response, and fair transit. If you'd like to see it split out like that, or we can leave it as a combination for the whole of the system. Either way is easy. So fixed route is seeing some increases, commuter route. It's interesting, South County is really coming up. They're still a little less than pre-COVID, but they're up to 976
Nice.
on our South County route last month.
Yeah,
Winston's.
dedicated route, they really see some jump.
Well, it's kind of cool because it's a nice loop
Mhm.
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Yep, Winston-Sutherland is, it's not going up very much, but that should change as soon as we have the improvements in place and the trainees will be going out with Shelley this week to do dry runs to make sure that the timing that we have put together for the routes actually work.
Yeah.
Because when we originally put them together, we went out and we ran those routes and the timing was good. Multiple different times throughout the day, we had run the routes. But when I came back to work on it again and was just gonna print it out to double check, all of the timing was gone. It was completely.
Well, it doesn't work anyway.
Completely.
And it
gone.
doesn't even work when you don't stop at most of the stops.
Oh, no, I'm talking about for the commuter route, leave the
Oh,
rest of it. And yes, most drivers up until 2 o'clock in the afternoon can run that Roseburg route on time, like within 3 to 5 minutes at the stop. But not all drivers, so that's.
I don't
something
know.
that
We
we're
stopped it
working on
when
as
I
well.
rode it. I picked it up at Fred Meyer's. We stopped at one stop next to Dairy Queen. And then turned around down Diamond Lake Boulevard and I was 12 minutes late.
Afternoon traffic is.
We got
so
almost every green light and we didn't stop at most places. So there's like no
Rolled right
way.
through, huh?
That is just bizarre. They
Yeah.
could
I
not
thought
have
you
been
had to
driving the
wait
speed
like
limit.
5 minutes at each stop, whether there was anybody there or not.
I don't know.
Da, da, da. It just it kept getting later and we weren't stopping.
You're in a time warp.
Tom, do you have experience with that?
Oh, yeah.
Chip in there?
Oh, sometimes there's a lot of variabilities that affect that. Where I used to work in Portland, there would be like we'd have routes and we had like a little paddle. Anyway, it would oftentimes list speeds you could go in certain neighborhoods. It might be like 10 miles lower than the speed that you could normally drive. But if you're driving a bus, they want you to drive slower. I don't know if this agency has anything like that.
Not yet.
But also like just no matter what you do as far as like driving a route schedule wise or anything, there can be just sometimes certain hours of the day, generally it's in the like earlier morning and later afternoon, where no matter what you do, unless you really push the speed and are extremely efficient with every movement driving a bus, you're going to lose time. And it only takes like 10 seconds here and there, and pretty soon you're up to minutes late. And
But isn't that why you have recovery time and stuff built into the schedule to?
Is there recovery time built in?
There used to be. There used
Okay.
to be. But yeah, we're revamping.
Right.
And that's part of what our whole transit master plan process is
Yeah.
also.
But,
right?
but those are just the things that make it frustrating, because again, it is the most difficult mode to take.
Mhm.
And
It
people
is.
don't understand the terms.
Yeah.
And just how to even write it. They just don't know how to do it. You know, you haven't ridden a bus, if you rode one and since elementary school, baby.
Yeah.
That'd be me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've taken a lot of.
Yeah.
one thing that would help out in Portland is for areas that are having a really hard time staying on schedule for buses, you would have jump lights that only buses could use. So it might be like a right turn lane. If there was a bus there, that turn light, the right turn signal would turn green and all the other signals be red and allow the bus through the intersection first. I don't know if that'd be a possibility on some of these routes with the city of Roseburg at all, but
Yeah, you could do bus signal prioritization, which keeps holds, if there's a sensor on the bus, and then it'll recognize that bus is in proximity and hold the green so the bus can continue through the intersection to help improve travel times on some of the busy corridors.
this also would be like from a red light stops. Like you spend a lot of time waiting at a red light, but if you have a sensor at that red light and the bus is in the right spot, then it can allow the bus to get the green light first and proceed ahead of traffic.
We just need more roundabouts.
Yeah, those are, I love roundabouts. They're great intersection.
Those are really,
They're looking at one at Melrose and Garden Valley and one at Brockway and 42.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're just.
Down there, is that by the cruise farm? Is
Yes.
that the-
Yes.
Yeah,
The X farm.
well,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, they might.
Yeah.
Somebody buy it, please, and keep it open.
Just keep my pies, make sure my pies.
But they use so much.
What else you got for us,
Monsanto.
So the Umpqua rides and paratransit are also gradually increasing in the number of rides provided as well. So doing more service than we were this time last year. Our medical transportation brokerage, Bay City's brokerage, is being replaced by a new brokerage called MGM. And they have reached out to us and asked us to be a provider, and they've asked us to provide wheelchair service as well, as not as the primary wheelchair service, but to start providing that service. So they are going to do the training and this is something that was really kind of cool about it. So for volunteer drivers, like when the UCAN volunteer drivers and our volunteer drivers that we have here, they don't have tablets in their vehicle. You know, everything that they do is handwritten. And this company provides an app that is very much like what we have on the tablets for the demand response drivers. And so it geo-tracks them. And so it knows when they log into the app when they're ready to leave their home, in the first thing in the morning. It tracks their non-client miles. And then when they load their passenger, they again enter an app that they've completed loading, and then when they complete the drop off. And so it tracks all of that information and then does a download, which will eliminate some of the work right now that our dispatchers are doing, and checking those rides and making sure that all of that information
I
is correct.
hated math homework at the end of
Yeah.
the shift. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, so it'll be really interesting. Of course, there are almost always a few hiccups as you are transitioning over to a new company. And they are located, I believe he said out of, well, he said he had been in Texas, but they're from somewhere back east. So they're not familiar with us locally. And there was some confusion. They sent us a contract for Lane Transit District's area, and it didn't define the service
Else we can take
area.
over their area too.
And yeah, so it's like, okay, so I think that maybe rather than amending this contract, we should actually have one that is for our area with
Mhm.
Umpqua Health Alliance. And so they were good to acknowledge that that was appropriate. So that should be going into effect in the December to January timeframe, getting the,
How does the wheelchair service work? I'm not doing a wheelchair.
oh, no. It would be, we would have to have employees that would, just like our paratransit and Umpqua rides drivers. But that would be all that they would do, would be the Oregon Health Plan wheelchair services.
So they would have special vehicles that they purchase, and then they would only take those kind of rides.
Well, they would be employees, so we would.
Oh, the
furnish
employees.
vehicles.
I thought it was medical transport,
It is.
as in the volunteer.
So the medical transport for volunteers is separate from the medical transport for wheelchairs. So we can't employ wheelchair drivers and then have volunteer wheelchair drivers. That's against the bully rules. So we would have to employ them.
Yeah,
So-
that'd be a nightmare trying to get everybody trained for them in and
Yeah.
certifications. Yeah.
So I did include one page here in your packet that does list all of the grants and that have vehicles that have been ordered. And so there are 4 different grants, and there are a total of 12 different vehicles. And some of them are hybrid vehicles, some of them are going to be gas, and some of them are vans. Most of them are vans, a couple of them are buses. And if you'll notice, right in the middle, there is a column that says match, and that's $294,456. So for that amount of match money, which is in our STIF plans specifically for match for vehicles, we're able to get a total of $1,135,743 worth of vehicles.
What a steal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's why I had really waited until we could get grants to cover these replacement vehicles, so we could just totally maximize those dollars.
And we're gonna have them all wrapped with the new stuff and all that.
Yes, they'll
Okay.
come wrapped,
Okay.
yeah. And then as they come wrapped, we'll be able to get that design and then have our local folks do the ones that we have locally. But a lot of the ones that we have locally are ready to cycle out. As these ones come in, we're going to want to find out whether or not the agencies that we currently contract with, DRTF, Douglas Resident Training Facilities, Sunrise, Mercy, and Reedsport, if they want us to donate any of the vehicles to them, and the rest of them need to go to auction. So when they go to auction, we'll want to put something out so that the various different companies that have asked over the years, if we have vehicles that
Mhm.
they, if we can't donate unless they're going to continue to be used for federally funded, types of things, but we can auction. And usually
You can
the
give away
things,
to nonprofits and things too. Right?
yeah. So we'll have to look at our procurement. No, that's not the right policy. It's the other one that should,
Or it's, yeah,
Disposition policy. or-
yeah,
it's part of it overall. It's a bigger financial policy
yes.
and it's a section in that. That's what I remember.
Disposal, how to
Yeah.
dispose them, yes. Disposal of
Dispose
vehicles.
of an asset.
So when I listened to our last board meeting, after it was over, I was surprised to hear some of the conversation at the end regarding our compliance with the site review monitoring. And so I came back and really wanted to dig into that because I was like, wait, we've done this work, but this form that we had been given, and I did not include this in you guys. Yeah, this form is one of those ones that collects and then you hit submit and it goes off to multiple different people. I had never done that. I had not submitted, so it had not gone off to RLS and Associates. And I had not forwarded it to David Schwartz at ODOT. And so Jennifer had, she participates in most of our meetings and she had been involved in a lot of this, but it hadn't even been, this form had not been forwarded to her either. So what I did is I went through and
Yeah, I know, because we had done a whole bunch of stuff. I was like, I know we approved it. She's like, yeah, we haven't seen anything.
yeah. So I went through and I did an email that attached every single item that we've worked on, and the resolutions are all in this monitoring form, and that went out to RLS and ODOT, and I haven't heard anything back, but I'm sure there are a couple of things that we're still in progress. So the preventive maintenance is also one of those things that I need to be reporting to you guys on a monthly basis, whether or not we're meeting those milestones at the 5,000 or 7,500 or 10,000 mile services within that plus or minus 500 miles. The challenge is that since July 1, a lot of them haven't gone 7,500 miles yet, so they haven't even had one service to be able to put into a monitoring sheet. But they are sending me weekly reports of the services that are scheduled for the various different.
So you could
vehicles.
just create a report that goes into the consent agenda. And even if it's currently 0,
Yeah,
whatever, I mean, that's fine. It is what it is until you get there, but I think that'd be just an easy, regular thing to do, just report whatever the number is.
okay,
Yeah.
I could do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Keep it simple.
And then I did apply for one grant. It is the federal 5339B bus and bus facilities. This, because the notice of funding included language that was specific to infrastructure for electric vehicles, electric buses, not just the vehicles, but the infrastructure to support them. And seeing as in order to do that infrastructure, it would be optimal to build it into the facility. I did the grant application and we'll see how it goes.
So these federal funds?
Mhm. Yep. So I did the application to be the development of the property next door. I put in 3 bus chargers and 3 electric 35-foot electric buses. But of course, that could be scaled.
Mhm.
And then the solar inverter and the panels. So as we build out that lot and get it all set up for the bus parking and everything, as we do the bus cover for the parking, that's a good place to put solar panels. As we build the preventive maintenance facility, again, if we build it with solar panels on it, then we'll be bringing back, reducing that, the cost of electricity to run the facility, but also to charge the buses.
Is it inappropriate to give you a standing ovation? I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for doing that.
I would have questions about the efficiency of solar in Oregon, but and also the quality.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be our sole source, but
Sure.
it would be in addition
Good
to.
also.
Yeah, and so it's one of those things that when it's working well, it's going to reduce that cost of, even we run about $250 a month for this facility here.
Solar technology is getting so much better.
It's
too.
getting so much better than it used to be, and that's a good thing.
There won't be
So-
much my solar lights in the backyard.
Yeah.
On a rainy
Yeah.
day, they go off once and then that's it.
If they do like solar panels that work well in this sort of environment where we don't get a lot of sun, if they do capture, there's difference. So
Yeah,
it'd be
different
wonderful
kinds.
if they've got, the best kind, but yeah, anyway.
Yeah,
So
so,
are we gonna try to get some money for shelters and things too additional?
yes, when the
With
next
the South
one,
County route picking up, there's some around Roseburg, I think, that could be done, probably some in Sutherland as we increase.
yep, so the really cool thing about doing this particular grant application, and it had different things that I'd never even heard of before, like the Justice 40 initiative. I had no idea, but since Sherry has come on board and taken all of the financial pieces off of my plate, I was actually able to sit down and research, read specifically what it was and how that would apply to our area, and then read specifically what they were looking for within the application. And I was able to put so much more time and attention to detail in this, that even if we don't get awarded, it's a federal thing, and typically they get requests for at least 10 times more than what the total amount is. And I think it's 409 million that they're awarding. But the last time that I had the time to put this kind of detail into this particular grant, we won. We were one of 24 projects funded out of the whole United States. And that's where our first 5 blue buses came from. So
I think for buses and big property development, things like that, federal funds work. And even though they might be eligible for shelters, I wouldn't do shelters with federal funds,
Yeah.
just because of all the federal requirements. I can tell you some numbers of what some of them have cost in federal, and it's a pretty embarrassing number.
So
And that was
this-
even years ago, but we're talking like 80 grand
My daughter
per stop,
brought
and we
it
don't
up.
want to be spending stuff like that.
No.
But the stiff discretionary is where
That's
we
what we
would want
want.
to go for
Yeah,
that.
okay. good.
As my daughter brought it up just this week, is how wonderful it is that we have the bus shelters, because when she rode the bus all the time, you didn't know where the bus stop was. You
Yeah,
really didn't, at least now you know where it kind of is.
yeah. Yeah, so there's a few more that we need to get the seats installed because we have some seating to get installed at some of the bus stops. And we have it in our project budget to get more shelters at some of the stops. So
Get some more Eagle Scouts to do some Eagle Scout projects, like our son did. He put up a lot of the,
Yeah.
several of the
we
bus
just
shelters as
pick
an
you
Eagle
guys'
Scout project.
brain, figure out how to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was the high point of my month, was actually being able to do this, to be able to put the time and energy into it that it deserves, and get it done before the deadline. And yeah,
And we got our reports and stuff all in.
Oh, yeah, okay, so our reports aren't due until the 15th, but so far I have all of the, oh yeah, all of our old stuff is, yeah,
All caught up.
oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah. All caught up, all paid for and ready to go. Interesting though, the STIF report, they have changed the deadline. It is not November 15th, like the APR, it is extended out to December 15th because they don't have the plans in Optus yet. So when I went in to open the STIF report, I just went through and selected everything and opened the report, and it opened 22 separate reports, which is what we had last time. But this time we only have 7 projects. So that was my first red flag. And I had to open to report on the last biennium because, because we didn't have our project in there to be able to select it for this biennium. So yeah, so yes, but that will be done on time. I think that our providers will be shocked at how fast they're getting paid once they submitted their information. City of Reedsport, I was able to go through the information the same day I got it, send it back to her with a couple of corrections that needed to be made, and answer questions that she had. And I think it was 2 days after we received it, we were able to ta-da, cut a check and send it out, so things have been changing and it's good.
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 Okay, well, thank you. Great report today. We'll move on. Number 10, ODOT update. We'll go ahead and skip over to that. So we'll go to number 11, items not on agenda. Does anybody have anything for discussion?
Something that we were gonna.
I will say that the transportation planning rule, administrative rule is being revised significantly, which in some ways will benefit transit, but there'll be some additional cost. It looks like if it was to go through for 2 transit agencies for certain capital and different things, and because of the intensity of the planning requirements, it'll take probably a significant amount of staff time on a number of different local and state planning initiatives to be a part of. So I mean, there'd be almost depending on in this area, there's probably a lot. So costs are gonna go through the roof already.
Yep.
Stuff. So anyway, that might be something that you want to look at, and if it happens, it's supposed to happen in springtime or something for adoption, but if it happens, it will be a fiscal impact to this agency, I think.
All right,
Yeah.
we definitely need it to look at getting a plan.
I mean, there's some really good things in there because they're actually concentrating on transit, but because they're concentrating on transit, there's a cost.
Is that what I should take away from this, that we need a planner?
You may need a planner or some
Who?
Some
dedicated
point.
staff at some
We
point
may.
if it comes in there, the district.
Transit
The
plan.
district, okay.
Yeah.
I was kind of curious if there's any issues sourcing buses yet. I know there's some supply chain problems with cars, but I was kind of curious if we've run into anything with that.
Yes, so the first 2 vans that I ordered, the initial delivery date was supposed to be sometime in October. And now it is sometime in February. Right now, it looks like 2/28 is the date that they have in there. The other vehicles are through March, April, and June, and the buses are actually pushed out into August already. So we shall see. It'll be interesting to see how it all. There are a couple of grants that we might have to ask for extensions for, but we won't know that until it gets closer. So.
Who's the manufacturer?
Oh, so we have multiple. So Northwest Bus got most of our awards. We did purchase one vehicle from Creative Bus, and then Shepke also got one of our RFQs as well.
Is Chet Key?
Chetky, SCHETKY, Chetky Northwest.
Okay.
And then the proposal that I did for the electric buses proposes that we use the state of Washington's price agreement, because they already have electric vehicles approved on their pricing agreement. So we would be able to work directly with Proterra and move forward fairly quickly.
Do you know if Grants Pass is finding that electric buses are working well, or what the experience has been now that they've had them for a little bit?
They really like theirs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wondering, I mean, they got them and they liked them at first. I'm just wondering, do you still like them?
Right.
Or do you have any buyer's remorse?
They do.
What's
Lane County is the one with buyer's remorse. They
What
had the brand that they got. I think they're going on 2 years that they were not able to get them. They were
Wow.
never able to put them in service.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and
That's
I think
important
they were,
brand is-
Yeah.
they were finally able to, I believe they returned them. I have to check into it.
Don't get that brand.
You're
No.
right.
Yeah.
No, well, so they each have their own issues for, the climate that they are. Proterra, you don't want in an extremely hot climate, because down in Southern California, some of the batteries blew up in the extreme heat. Yeah.
Good inside information to know.
So on 100+ days, you don't want to use those. That's not a good idea.
You have that problem with electric trains, but it's the wiring though that has a problem.
Okay.
The wire
Yeah.
expands, and we have to go. When I was a train operator, we had to operate at much reduced speeds, so you wouldn't pull the wires down.
Oh,
Eventually, they fixed some of the stuff, but yeah, there's all kinds of extra little issues whenever you have different technologies. But,
Yeah.
they've had to adapt due to the increasing temperatures up there for some of those reasons. But
It got warm in Portland.
Yeah.
yeah, it was like 118 over the summer
Holy
for a couple days.
Oh, goodness, you didn't know that? Bad
No.
it was? Yes, and the
That's
wires
bad.
melted and.
Was that this year?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's when I was back at
Oh.
boot camp graduation.
It was-
Oh,
it was-
like that.
It was-
14
yeah.
here.
yeah. it was
Yeah.
miserable.
Crazy. Now, I
Yeah.
have a question.
Shoot.
I'm not really sure where it goes in this agenda, but does the state require us to have, the district to have something that defends us against ransomware, and do we have that? I'm so glad to see you smile, because
We're working on that.
So we had, that was the item that I was like, didn't we have one for not on agenda? And so I actually just downloaded a sample policy and, updated it to be UPTD. It was through special districts that I got it. And that is exactly what it is. It is about having cybersecurity. So that's something that I'm going to send out to you guys to review, see if you have any
that's really-
recommendations. I'm also going to send it to Cortec and see if this is something that I'm certain that it's something that it's easy for them to implement. There are only a couple of things that we don't do. We don't require our passwords to be changed every 90 days, which is actually a good practice. When we started, there was just 2 of us. And so we didn't have some of the same issues that we could run into now.
do we have off-site storage for
Yes.
backup? And it's really been weighing heavily on my mind.
Well, right now, out there in the world of things, that is a message that I am seeing a lot.
Yeah.
Back everything up. If you have pictures, videos, anything on social media that you want to make sure you're able to keep, back it up.
Roseburg High School got hit with it and
Yeah,
had
they
to
got-
pay the ransom. And we have millions of dollars that we're responsible for. So I just really want us to be proactive. And I
Yes.
didn't know if we already had, and I missed it. You know.
Good question.
Good
We
question.
do, and they have, like an alarm set up. So one night, I got a call at like 10 o'clock at night on a Saturday night from Cortec. And said that he had seen like 8 login attempts on my offsite computer within just a really short period of time. And it wasn't me.
Obviously, you had no sleep.
Yeah, no.
Not at 10 o'clock.
No, but the second time that it happened, I was actually sitting in my chair and the computer was right in front of me. And I watched so the screen is black if you're not using it. And then the picture popped up. And that happens sometimes, just a power bump will do that. But then the thing for you to type your name in popped up. And then the little black dots, I see a dot and a dot, and then another dot, and then a dot. And then wrong password, it went back to and I was like, oh my gosh, what did I just see? And it happened again and again and again. And I'm turning things off. I'm unplugging things. I'm like getting it unattached to, the Wi-Fi and everything. And then all of a sudden I had a moment of, I wonder, because I heard a crash in the kitchen. And I have a keyboard like this that was on the kitchen table. And there was a kitten walking across the
Yes. My cats turn my screen sideways because it's.
Rename it hacker.
Yeah, I totally.
You
did
feed me
that.
my vittles or?
I'll change your password forever.
Perfect. All right, so next thing on our agenda is public comment. So any comment?
Good meeting.
There we go.
That's very good.
Thanks, right?
You can
Item
come back again.
13, agenda build. So I have the 2 items, accounting and finance policy and procedures manual, and the executive committee, kind of building a draft bylaw that we can review. If you could send that out ahead of time, get those, that'd be awesome. So we can have that discussion.
Yes.
Anything else? There's only 2 things I had.
Security
The,
policy.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
I don't know, I'd like to look at bylaw changes. I told you you're gonna hate me. But about conflict of interest and possibilities of how many stones do you want on this board? We have family members elected to the board, and I've heard about it in the community. So I think that we should have a policy that restricts or disqualifies family members from being on the board. And I want to discuss it. I want us to have a discussion so that people can hear what you have to say and what you think. Because I just want to know, how many stones do you want on the board? It's not like I hate the bakers, but people want to know.
Well, obviously, people voted for me, so.
They did vote for
And
you,
and we
but
let it out in front that I was his wife.
yes, you
so
did. But
there you
it's
go.
not, it's
The
not
voters
union,
have spoken.
it's not Union Gap Water Board, okay?
Yeah.
Union Gap Water Board has family members on it, and a small board can have family members on it because you have a dearth of people willing to volunteer. But Douglas County is over 5,000 square miles. It has a lot of different regions, and it has a population of 110,000 people. And it's not appropriate, I believe, for us to have 2 people from the same household.
Well, there was an opportunity for lots of people to apply for this job or
I'm
volunteerism, and there was only 2 of us.
I'm aware,
And
So
voters
it is,
voted.
but it's like it looks bad.
I don't think so.
No, the optics on it are terrible.
There are a lot of words across the.
Yes,
state.
there are, but
even
they're
in,
small.
even in this county.
Well,
And
that-
we have our hands in every paycheck, every working person in Douglas County chips in money. And they deserve representation that doesn't come from a single area. And we don't have people, I mean, Tom's from Oakland and
Roseburg
Mark
now.
are now, damn you.
I moved during the election.
and Lonnie's from Myrtle Creek. We don't have anybody from Reedsport. We don't have anybody from Tiller and that kind of thing. And
Well,
I
if you
think
want to go
that,
down there and
but
recruit
we
people,
can't,
that'd be
but
great.
in the interest of time, I want us to have that discussion and I want it to be open so that the public can hear our thinking.
So the next meeting.
So what would we label that?
Bylaw review.
Oh, okay.
Much better than I had.
Me too.
Okay, so. Regular events. Sorry, I got lost in that was the initial thing that you said.
I got lost too. I'm not used to talking anymore.
Anything else that I, besides those 4 items?
Not that I know of.
Okay, and then there'll be more to come, obviously, so. Okay. Time is 7:20. So that's an hour now.
Yeah.
I was thinking, it's like,
Meeting
that's
adjourned.
a
I'm
long
really
meeting and it
tired.
doesn't
I'm
seem that
really
long.
tired because it's 8:20.
That's a good meeting, guys.